Hello, I'm Ciaran Lynch and welcome to OviCast, the Teagasc Sheep podcast. Each episode brings us insights, advice and technical updates for the sheep industry. In this episode, we're going to focus on checking resistance or conducting a drench test. Dealing with anthelminthic resistance is an issue on our sheep farms, and determining the efficacy of the products we use is a very necessary first step in adapting to this challenge. In this episode, I'm joined by Damian Costello, sheep specialist, who discusses why it's so important to check the products that we're using on farms.
There may be resistance to some or all of the products being used on the farm. And if we don't know what products are working effectively, I suppose we're shooting in the dark somewhat.
It's a bit of a difficult one to answer. You mentioned resistance, so maybe just to clarify for those listening, what is resistance or what are we talking about here?
Well, resistance can be defined as the ability of worms to survive a dose that you'd normally expect to kill them, the worms. And it's important to remember that it's the worms that develop resistance, really. And look, it's a big challenge on sheep farms, and I suppose the level of resistance to products varies very much from farm to farm.
Maybe just to tease that one a bit further, why is it such a threat?
Well, treating lambs with a product that's not working effectively is firstly a waste of time and money, and secondly, you can expect poor lamb thrive as lambs are continuing to carry a heavy worm burden despite having been treated for stomach worms. So that if it hasn't worked, they're still carrying that burden.
So the lack of effective product and maybe the lack of understanding what is working on the farm is an issue. At that, really, the focus has to be on determining what works or what's working on particular farms. What's the best way to do this?
I suppose, put simply, you take a fecal sample before dosing and after dosing with the particular product you're using, and based on the fecal egg count before and after, this will give you an indication of how effectively the product worked. It's what we call a drench test.
So you're actually checking, is it doing what it's meant to do, essentially? Just maybe just for those tuning into it, will you take us through the key steps involved in conducting a drench test?
Okay, I suppose the first step, Ciaran, is you would contact an approved laboratory that has the facilities to do these fecal egg samples. They provide sample kits to the farmer, so you're as well to get two kits when you contact them, because you need to take a fecal sample before you dose and after you dose. And after that, I suppose it's a matter of organising your dosing equipment, decide on what product you're going to use to dose the lambs, and that's the product you're testing effectively.
So, right, we have the kits. What do we do next?
Okay, ideally, you've determined that based on a recent fecal egg count that the lambs are approaching a stage where they need a dose. So you're combining really this test with a routine dose that you're giving to lambs. So you collect all the lambs in the handling yard for dosing. But just before you start dosing, maybe you randomly select a group of 15 lambs and put them into a clean pen. So you've swept out and washed out this pen, and you put your random 15 lambs into it. So it's important that you mark each lamb. You put a good permanent mark on them so that you'll be able to identify these lambs for the post-drench sample as well. You allow them a little bit of time to defecate in the pen, and then you take your first kit. Generally, there's 10 sample pots or jars. So you take 10 separate fresh dung samples from this pen where you have your 15 lambs. So there's generally a little spoon in the container. So if you can take 10 separate samples from 10 separate dungs in the pen, roughly the same amount from each sample if you can, and just place them in the containers and seal up your containers.
So now you've got a representative measure of the parasite load that's in them lambs. What do you do next to them?
Okay, so you've taken your sample before you dose. So now you go ahead and dose those 15 lambs with the chosen product, and you continue to dose all the lambs in the group. Really, a couple of important things, maybe as always, just before you do your actual dosing. It's important that you calibrate your dosing equipment so that it's given the correct amount as per the manufacturer's label. Again, you dose to the heaviest lamb that's in the group. So you maybe weigh the couple of heaviest lambs that's in there and dose accordingly. And again, ensuring that you have correct dosing technique, that you're placing the drenching gun over the lamb's tongue and towards the back of the tongue, so that they're swallowing the dose in its entirety. So the reason you're kind of taking these steps, I suppose, is that it's none of these issues that are causing the product not to work. That you're giving that you're ensuring that you're giving them the correct amount as per the manufacturer's label.
So you're ruling out some of the potential errors, and they're things that really should be put into practice every time we dose. So we've collected the sample. Yeah. We've collected the sample. We've dosed the lambs. Getting that sample away to the lab is obviously the next step in it. But it's important how you deal with that. Maybe you'll take us through that.
It is. It's important, I suppose, that you post it as soon as possible after taking the sample, so that the samples are fresh. There's probably generally there's some small form to be included with it, the relevant details to be included with the sample. So preferably though, if you can post it on the day of sampling, and the aim should be to take your samples maybe early in the week on a Monday or Tuesday, so that your dung samples aren't sitting in a post office over the weekend if you post them towards the end of the week. So, as I say, ideally they should be posted that day. If for some reason they cannot be posted on that day, maybe they should be kept in a fridge overnight, not in a freezer, and again avoiding having them in direct sunlight. So the idea of having them thrown in the dash of the Jeep for the day with the warm sun on top of it is not desirable. So get them away as quick as you can, I suppose.
So you're reducing the potential risk of them hatching, and you're going to get a more accurate count. And again, as you indicated, it's important.
Well, exactly, yeah. If these are the type of things that can cause a hatch, and as I say, in order to get the full benefit that you want to get as accurate a reading as you possibly can.
To take that second sample, Damian, I suppose it depends in some extent what product we're using, but there's a good guideline there for that too.
That's right. Yeah, it's straightforward enough. As I say, if you use a product from the yellow drench group, we'll say the levamisols, your retest is 7 days after the initial dose. If you're using a white drench, a benzimidazole, or the macrocyclic lactones, which are the clear drenches, your retest is 14 days later. So it's 7 days for levamisols, and for the other two groups, it's 14 days.
Okay, so we've gone through the process. We've dosed the lambs. We sent off the first sample. We sent off the second sample. The lab does its work. We get back a result. How do we interpret that information, Damian, when we get it back?
Again, just to point out, I suppose, Ciaran, the second sample, I suppose, the taking of the second sample is exactly the same procedure as the first. You get your lambs in again, and you must get in the 15 lambs that you've marked the first time for the sample. But to answer your question, so you've got your initial count, and you've got your post-drench count. So ideally, I suppose, the ideal scenario is that you've got 100% results that the product has worked, that there has been a full kill of all eggs that were there. In terms of the actual test itself, if the reduction is 95% or greater, we deem the product to be working effectively. However, if it's less than 95% reduction in the egg count from the first count to the second count, there is some level of resistance there, or the product is not fully working. So, for example, if you take the case where your pre-drench sample, say, was 600 eggs per gram, you take your post-drench sample, you find it's down to 300 eggs per gram. You've only got a 50% reduction, so this product is not working effectively, or this group of products is not working effectively on your farm.
So at that stage, Damian, you're armed with information. At least you know what's working. By explaining some of the reasons for poor performance during the season and why you're not getting the response you expect. Maybe taking that to the next step. Oftentimes we can get a result like that, knowing what to do with it or what steps to take. Any advice for farmers out there for that?
Yeah, look, that's the time really to consult with your vet or your advisor to give you assistance in interpreting the results, and probably discussing the steps to be taken from there really. Is there further investigation required to confirm that the products are not actually working, or that's the time to contact somebody, and don't be afraid to contact your vet or advisor to discuss the options.
I think that's important. They're there to provide a service. We are all in this industry, and it's no harm to ask, as opposed to taking some of the guesswork out of it.
Well, absolutely. And again, look, I suppose the advice really would be maybe to start with the products that you use most regularly on your farm, because maybe the chances of resistance are greater where there is maybe continuous use of a product from a particular group. So, for example, if you say start with if you've done the test, we'll say on the whites, the benzimidazoles, maybe look at, and you've got your result. Then you should maybe look at doing the other groups, the levamisols or the macrocyclic lactones, doing that doing one of those maybe at the next time your lambs are due for a dose, and maybe building the full picture, I suppose, that that you know your status, I suppose, in relation to the three main groups of anthelminthics that are in use on farms in Ireland, really. Just to mention, maybe, I suppose, that people will remember, we'll say going back 4 or 5 years ago, from the time of STAP, the discussion group program. It was one of the options that farmers took on at that time, to do this drench test on the different products. But even if you found at the time that you had no big issues with resistance, it's probably now is as good a time as any to maybe retest the different products on your farm. It should be done every couple of years, really, because as I say, you may have had no issues 3 or 4 years ago with resistance, but it builds over time, so the thing may have changed in the meantime.
Certainly checking what's working is a key step in a more sustainable control program. Damian, thanks very much for your time.
Thanks, Ciaran, no problem at all.
Determining how well or how effective a product is at treating stomach worms is a vital step in having an effective control plan in place for you on your farm. I will include a link to a flyer in the description. It outlines 4 of the key areas we need to focus on for the coming seasons to have a more sustainable control plan in place, and it also describes the key steps involved in conducting a drench test. That's it for me for this episode. Again, for any other updates on the sheep program, keep an eye on our Twitter page at Teagasc Sheep. I'm Ciaran Lynch. Thanks for joining us in this episode. Don't forget to subscribe and tune in to future episodes.